A veteran found a police officer and his canine frozen in snow, then did something unbelievable. Snow fell without a seam over Silver Ridge, Wyoming. The sky had no edges, only a white weight that pressed the world flat. Jack Harlow, 68, moved into it like a man wading through a bad dream. His cane sank with each step. His breath came out in short ghosts. The timberline to his left was a smear of darker grey. Home was still a quarter-mile away. The sound reached him between gusts, not the wind, not the crack of ice, a bark thin and strangled, as if the mountain had its hand over a throat. Jack stopped. Every old nerve in him woke up. He lifted his head and listened. The next bark was weaker. Then nothing. He left the trail without thinking. The drifts swallowed his boots. Branches slapped his shoulders. He worked the flashlight from his belt and punched a cone of light through the storm. It caught a shape in the snow, man-sized and wrong. Jack dropped to one knee. A young officer lay on his side, hands cinched behind him, wrists blackened by cold and rope. The face was the color of paper. Frost clung to his lashes. A few feet away, a German shepherd was half buried, muzzle wrapped with blood-stiff cloth. The dog's ribs moved once, barely. Then again. "You're not dying out here," Jack said, voice steady because it had to be. He pulled a knife from his pocket. The blade shook only a little. He reached for the dog first. The shepherd's eyes flickered open, amber and sharp even through the ice. The dog saw him, then cut a glance past Jack's shoulder, a quick dart of fear. Jack stilled. He followed that look and found nothing but snow and trees. "Easy," he told the dog. "I've got you." He slid the blade under the soaked fabric and eased it free. The dog gulped air like a man breaking the surface of a lake. No panic, no bite, just a low, raw sound that was not a whine and not a growl. Duty trying to breathe. Jack turned to the officer's wrists. The knots were clean. Field style. Pull here, bury there. The kind of tie you learn from men who teach you to do harm fast and leave faster. He cut through and rolled the officer onto his back. A slip of white on the pine behind them caught his light. Paper, nailed to the bark, rain-washed ink turned to rivers. This is the end for those who disobey. Jack felt the old burn in his ribs, the scar that wakes in bad weather. He looked back down. The shepherd had pushed a paw into the snow and stopped. The paw hovered, then tapped twice. Not random. Deliberate. Jack followed the line of that paw and saw a hair-thin filament vanish under the crust, taut and glittering like a spider thread. Tripwire. He froze with the knife still in his hand. The dog held his eyes. The storm hissed between them. Jack leaned in and traced the filament with the blade without touching it, then angled his light across the drift. The wire led to a hummock near the officer's hip. No telling what sat under. There, enough to turn this patch of quiet into shrapnel. "Good boy," he said, a whisper the wind tried to steal. "You just saved us." He slid his arms under the shepherd instead of stepping forward. The dog was heavier than he looked. Muscle and grit even while half frozen. Jack backed away in careful half steps, keeping his feet exactly inside his old tracks. He set the dog on his coat a safe distance downwind, wrapped him, then went back for the officer. "Stay with me," he said to the kid who could not hear him. "I'm Jack. You're coming home." He rolled the officer toward him and lifted. The world went white around the edges of his vision. He breathed slow until his legs belonged to him again. He retraced his path, print by print, the wire a ghost tugging at the edge of his thoughts. He laid the officer beside the dog, checked both pulses, then glanced once more at the tree and its nailed warning. This was no random cruelty. This was a message for anyone bold enough to read it. He made 2 trips to the truck, each one stealing a piece of his strength. The heater blew nothing until it blew everything. The cab filled with the smell of wet fur and copper. The dog lifted his head and looked past Jack to the back seat, found the officer, and inched forward until his muzzle rested on the man's sleeve. The touch was light. The choice was not. Jack put the truck in gear. The tires whined. The road to his cabin was a memory under the drifts, but the old Ford knew the way. He drove with both hands and one prayer. The wipers beat time. The mountain pressed close. In the rear view he watched two chests rise and fall, not in sync at first. Then the rhythm found itself. Halfway home, another twist cut across the road like a black seam. Tire tracks. Not his. Heading out from the direction of his cabin. Fresh under the new snow. Wide tread. Heavy load. He pressed the brake. The truck slid once and found its bite. Someone had been up there while he was gone. Jack eased off the brake and kept going, mind sorting the details the way a medic sorts a field pack. Knots like training manuals. A tripwire he almost stepped into. A note that sounded like an order, not a threat. And now, tracks where there should not be tracks. He pulled into the clearing and killed the lights. The cabin stood dark, shoulders hunched under the storm. He waited. Snow ticked on the windshield. Nothing moved. He stepped out and tasted the air. Cold wood. Cold iron. No diesel. The tracks arced around the cabin and back into the trees as if someone had circled, looked, and left. He carried the shepherd in first and set him near the stove, wrapped in wool. The dog's eyes tracked him without turning his head. Jack stoked the fire until it threw honest heat, then returned for the officer and laid him on the couch. He worked like he had always worked. Warm the core. Check the airway. Treat what bleeds. His hands found the rhythm faster than his thoughts did. The officer stirred and tried to speak. Jack leaned close. The words were paper-thin. A name. A warning. Then another word that made the hair lift on Jack's neck. Hawks. Jack set the kettle on, looked through the frost-fogged window towards the trees, and felt the mountain hold its breath. He had gone into the storm for one dying man and one dying dog. He had come back with something else riding shotgun. A truth with teeth. Behind him the dog raised his head. Not a bark. A dry cough of sound that pointed, not pleaded. Jack followed the stare to the door, to the seam of light at its edge, to the sliver of snow sifting in like flour. The latch he had set before leaving hung skewed. Someone had tried it. Jack picked up the rifle that leaned by the frame. He checked the chamber by feel and set it within reach. Then he knelt beside the shepherd and pressed 2 fingers to the warm fur at the throat. The pulse beat steady. The eyes held his for a long moment. In them Jack saw desert heat and siren blue, and a promise that did not break even when the cold wanted everything. Not an accident, he said, as much to himself as to the dog. Not tonight. Not on my mountain. Outside, the snow fell soft as ash. Inside, 3 lives held the line against it. The cabin breathed like a living thing. Wood crackled in the stove. Heat climbed the seams of the walls, and the air shed its bite inch by inch. Jack fed the fire, then set a pot on to steam. He worked in a quiet rhythm. Warm the core. Check the airway. Treat what bleeds. He had done it in tents, basements, and alleys. Tonight it was pine and stone. The officer came back slow. First a twitch, then a cough, then a start that sent pain across his face. Jack steadied him with a palm to the shoulder. "You are safe. Name?" "Ryan," the man rasped. "Ryan Keller, narcotics, Fairpoint." His lips were split. One eye was swelling shut. He tried to sit. Jack kept him down with a look. "Your dog?" "Rex." The shepherd lifted his head as if answering roll call. He tried to stand. His front leg buckled. Jack moved to him first. He eased a towel under the chest and felt along the ribs with careful fingers. Heat, swelling, no grind. Rope burns on the muzzle, a slice near the flank. The pattern told its own story. Ryan watched from the couch. They jumped us on the ridge. We were tracking a shipment. Not drugs. Something bigger, moving under that cover. What cover? Farm equipment on paper. In transit it becomes parts that do not appear on any invoice. Jack cleaned the cut with warm water. Rex did not flinch. He held Jack's eyes and breathed steady, as if he understood the rules here. No panic, no waste. "Who tied you?" Jack asked without looking up. "They wore masks. They never used names. One of them said the word Hawks, not like a team, like he was testing me to see if I knew it." Jack felt the old anger crawl up his spine. He clipped the thread on the bandage, then checked Ryan's wrists. The skin had been chewed by rope, but under the frostbite he saw something else. The edges were clean. Someone had swabbed the area before they left him to freeze. "Field work," Jack said. Ryan blinked. "What?" "Your wounds were cleaned before they dumped you. They did not want infection. They wanted silence. That is a trained hand." Ryan stared into the fire and swallowed. "Then it is not a street crew." "No." Rex pushed off the blanket again. He slid to the floor and dragged his body across the boards. Every inch cost him, but he did not stop until his head rested against Ryan's arm. The touch was light and firm, a checkpoint. Ryan's face changed. The pain was still there, but the fear shifted to something older. "He crawled to me after they left. I thought he was gone. He was not." Jack remembered dust rising off a road in Anbar, a dog with a torn ear and eyes like a person's. He remembered a promise he had made into the noise. No one gets left behind. He pushed the thought away and looked at Rex again. The dog's ears were still. His eyes were not. They tracked the door and then returned to Jack. A question and a warning inside one look. Jack moved to the gear he had thrown against the wall. He lifted Ryan's jacket and shook it out. It was torn along the liner. He checked the pockets, then the seams. He did not find a phone. He found a weight in the collar that did not belong, a flat disc buried under the stitching. He set the jacket down and took a small knife from the mantel. 3 strokes opened the seam. He pried the disc free and turned it in the lamplight. Matte black. No markings, a tiny red eye that did not blink. Ryan saw it and went still. Tracker. That would be my guess. Jack walked to the door and opened it a crack. Snow hissed along the threshold. He stood and listened. Nothing but wind. He closed the door and crossed to the stove. He did not throw the disc in. He set it on the hearthstone instead and covered it with an empty coffee tin. Ryan's jaw clenched. "You are keeping it." "For a minute. Whoever tagged you might like to see you sitting quiet. Let them watch you do nothing while we get ready to move." Rex shifted. His nose lifted. His chest rumbled with a sound that sat low to the floor. Jack crouched and held up a hand. The dog's growl thinned to a line, then faded. He kept his eyes on the door. Alert, not afraid. Jack mixed sugar and salt into warm water and got it into Ryan, a sip at a time. He wrapped the wrists and checked pupils again. Then he laid a hand on Rex's neck, feeling the pulse that beat there, steady and strong. "Tell me the rest," Jack said. "We had a tip on a transit up near Boyer Pass. We saw a convoy where no farm trucks go in winter. I called it in. The radio died mid-sentence, then lights in the trees. No faces, gloves, ropes. They took my phone and said nothing. Someone told them your route." Ryan shut his eyes. "Inside, it has to be." Rex lifted his head and looked at the mantel. Not at the rifle. At the old green box beside it. Jack followed the gaze. The box held a field modem he had not touched in years. He clicked the latches and stared at the dust inside. "You want to send a message?" Jack said to Ryan. "I know a man who still listens. Federal, not local. But once that signal goes, we do not own the clock." Ryan nodded. Do it. Jack set the modem on the table and began to lay out cables with a care that made his hands look young again. He paused only once. The cabin was warm now. The storm had dropped to a whisper. Ryan's breathing had evened out. The dog had closed his eyes. Then Rex moved. Not a start. Not a full rise. He lifted one paw and placed it on Ryan's chest like a seal on a document. He kept it there for a count of 5. He pulled it back and stared at Jack until Jack answered the look. I see you, Jack said. You brought him home. Now we finish it. A gust pushed at the door. The latch clicked and settled. Jack did not look away this time. He tightened the line to the modem and crossed to the hearth. He lifted the coffee tin, took the tracker, and slid it into a metal biscuit tin with a lid. He walked it to the back door and stepped out into the cold. He set the tin on the stump by the shed, where the wind would drift snow over it. He came back in and barred the door. Ryan had fallen into a hard, ugly sleep. Rex watched him breathe. Jack stood between them and the night, and felt something old stand up inside him. The fear was still there, but it had a shape now. He had names to chase, and a dog who could find them. Instinct, he said to the room. Yours. Mine. His. The stove popped. The window hummed. The mountain held its breath again, as if it understood what had changed. The cabin was not only a place of rescue now, it was a place of intent. And somewhere out there a red eye blinked against the snow, watching a signal that would not tell the truth. By morning the storm had burned itself out. The forest lay buried under a white silence that looked peaceful, but wasn't. Jack stepped out first, rifle slung, breath curling in the brittle air. Ryan followed, slower, wrapped in Jack's spare parka. Rex trotted ahead, nose low, moving with purpose. The dog wasn't guessing. He was tracking memory. The trail from last night was nearly gone, erased by wind, but Rex found it anyway. He led them past the ridge where Jack had first heard him bark. The world looked different in daylight, but the same unease crawled beneath the calm. Rex stopped near a fallen pine, pawed at the crusted snow until the dirt bled through. Jack knelt beside him. The snow there had been packed hard, unnatural. He scraped deeper and saw it, twin ruts carved into the ground. Wide, heavy tread tires, not the kind that belonged to forest trucks. Military, Jack murmured. Ryan crouched beside him. I thought so. The convoy that hit us had the same pattern. They moved like a unit, not dealers. Rex barked once, sharp. His paw nudged something half-frozen near the track, a brass casing. 338 Lapua, clean despite the frost. Jack turned it between his fingers, feeling the cold bite of memory. Sniper round, he said quietly. Used for distance work. Nobody hunts elk with this. Ryan met his eyes. So what are they doing here? A voice came from behind them. Depends who you mean by they. Jack swung the rifle halfway up before he recognized the shape moving through the trees. A woman in a dark parka, ranger badge on the sleeve, snowshoes strapped tight. She raised both hands. Easy. Lucy Brandt, County Search and Rescue. Her face was wind-burned, her voice even. She nodded toward the tracks. Saw your truck down the road. Thought I'd see what kind of mess blew in. Jack lowered the barrel, but only slightly. Mess is one word for it. Lucy stepped closer, her gaze catching the shell casing in his hand. She whistled low. That's not hunting ammo. Tell me something I don't know, Jack said. She squatted near the tree where he'd cut Ryan loose. Her eyes sharpened. This not work. Double half-hitch, inverted wrap. Military extraction technique. Used for capture, not restraint. You don't see it outside private contracts. Ryan stiffened. You mean mercenaries? Lucy looked up. I mean people who used to wear uniforms and decided to rent their skills out after they lost their cause. Rex let out a low growl. His tail didn't wag. His ears pointed to the north tree line. Jack followed his gaze. Something glinted there, half buried. He approached carefully, brushing aside snow until a fragment of black polymer appeared, part of a gun grip, cracked and slick with frozen blood. Etched near the base was a small emblem, a hawk with its talons closed. Ryan's breath caught. That's them. That's the mark they wore on their vests. Jack pocketed the fragment. His pulse thudded slow and deliberate. Then they're not ghosts. They're local. Lucy stood, arms crossed against the cold. You two planning to take this to Fairpoint PD? Ryan's laugh came out flat. Half of them probably eat from the same table. Jack said nothing. His gaze swept the tree line. The calm felt staged, like a battlefield before dawn. They'll come back for what they left, he said. And now we're on their list. Lucy tilted her head. You've seen this before. Jack met her eyes. In another desert. Different flags, same rules. For a moment none of them spoke. The wind moved through the trees, whispering over the open tracks. Then Rex barked again, short and urgent, circling near a patch of snow where a faint line of red trailed towards the woods. Jack's instincts screamed before his thoughts did. He yanked Ryan back just as a sharp crack split the air. A bullet punched through the branch above their heads, spraying bark and snow. Rex lunged forward, teeth bared, barking like thunder. Jack dropped flat, sighted down his rifle toward the ridge. The shot hadn't come from far. He glimpsed a flicker of movement, dark coat, retreating fast. Too clean, too professional. The shooter didn't linger. When the silence returned, Jack's heart was a hammer in his chest. He looked at Ryan, then Lucy, then Rex, still standing, chest heaving. Guess that answers your question, Lucy said. They're still here. Jack exhaled, watching the cloud of his breath drift away. No, he said quietly. They never left. Rex padded closer, snow clinging to his fur. He lifted his nose to the wind and stared into the trees where the shooter had vanished. His ears tilted back, not from fear, but from recognition. Jack reached down, resting a hand on the dog's neck. The muscle beneath was solid, trembling with life and purpose. Looks like your war found us again, he said, voice low. And this time, the battlefield was home. The afternoon light over Silver Ridge was brittle, like glass about to crack. The storm had passed, but the quiet that followed carried its own kind of threat. Jack, Ryan, and Lucy moved along the frozen creek, where Rex led the way, nose low, tail stiff. Every few yards he paused, sniffed the air, then changed direction with a certainty that only instinct could explain. Jack had seen that look before, in men who could sense danger before hearing it. The dog was working a pattern, tracing the ghosts that men left behind. They reached a bend in the creek, where the snow formed a jagged shelf. Rex stopped cold. He let out a low sound, not a growl, but something closer to a warning. His paw brushed against something half buried in the ice. Jack knelt and brushed it clear. A strip of dark fabric emerged, stiff and crusted with frost. When he lifted it, the scent hit immediately. Industrial cleaner, sharp enough to burn the nose. Mixed beneath it was another smell, faint but unmistakable. Blood that had dried and frozen, then thawed again. Lucy frowned. That's not random. Someone tried to sterilize it. Jack's hand tightened around the cloth. Not someone. Professionals. Ryan looked pale under the bruises. He stared at the torn edge, then muttered, They used that same detergent in the warehouse we raided 2 weeks ago. We found barrels marked for export. Industrial solvent masking chemical residue. That's what they're moving under the cover of farming equipment. Jack turned the cloth in his gloved hands. You said they called themselves the Hawks? Ryan hesitated, as if saying the name out loud would wake something he'd rather leave buried. Yeah, the Hawks Division. One of them said it right before they hit me, like they wanted me to hear it. Jack went still. The sound of that name dragged something old out of the dark. The Hawks, he said, the words dry in his mouth. That's not a gang. That's a private unit. They worked the Tigris corridor in '09. I saw their work outside Fallujah. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. Lucy looked from one man to the other. You're telling me a disbanded mercenary division is running ops in Wyoming? Jack stared out at the tree line, the wind cutting through the silence. Not disbanded. Rebranded. Someone kept the spine of it alive. Men like that don't just disappear. They change uniforms. Ryan rubbed his wrists absently, the rope scars still red. If they were Hawks, then Grant Weller is involved. He led the Joint Task Force before retiring last year. He still consults for half the private security firms in the state. Lucy's voice dropped. You think your own commanding officer set you up? Ryan nodded once, slow and certain. He was the only one who knew our position that night. Rex's head lifted suddenly, eyes narrowing toward the north. His ears flattened, then pivoted again. A faint metallic echo rolled through the valley, the hollow clank of a distant engine. Jack motioned for silence. The three of them crouched low. Through the trees, a dark SUV crawled up the service road that led toward Jack's cabin. Its windows were tinted black. No plates, no reason to be there. The vehicle paused by the tree line, idled for a long breath, then turned back toward the ridge. Jack's pulse quickened, but his mind stayed cold. They're sweeping for us, probably using thermal. They'll be back after dark. Lucy whispered, We should call the sheriff. Ryan shook his head. No cops. Fairpoint PD answers to Weller's contractors. The second I call, my name goes public and I'm dead before morning. Jack studied the dog. Rex hadn't relaxed. His nose stayed fixed toward the ridge, every muscle tight. He trusted that instinct more than any badge. Jack turned back to Ryan. Then we handle it quiet. We find proof and take it above their reach. Ryan met his eyes. You mean the feds? I mean someone who still believes in the law, not the men hiding behind it. Jack said, But first, we need to know what they're protecting up here. Rex pawed the ground again, drawing Jack's attention to another patch of disturbed snow beside the creek. Beneath it lay a shard of tempered glass, black on one side. Jack turned it over and found faint etching, a serial code, followed by a company logo, HawkTech Defense Systems. Lucy exhaled. That's Weller's firm. They build targeting systems for the military. Jack's voice was quiet. And now they're testing them here. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of ozone from the valley, the scent of burned wires, of engines that had been running too long. Jack pocketed the shard and looked back toward the mountains. War never leaves, he said. It just finds a new address. Rex brushed against his leg, gaze steady, unblinking. The dog's breath fogged, the air like smoke from a spent round. Jack rested his hand on Rex's back. All right, soldier, let's find out what else they buried under this snow. And as they turned toward the ridge, the first low rumble of thunder rolled over Silver Ridge. Not from the sky, but from the engine of something mechanical waking in the woods. Night came down like a curtain, thick and absolute. The wind hissed through the chimney of Jack's cabin, but inside, the fire burned low and steady. Ryan sat at the table, his eyes unfocused, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. Lucy was sorting the last of the supplies, but the air between them had changed. The silence was heavier, charged. Rex lay on the floor near the door, chest rising slow, his eyes half closed but never fully at rest. Every sound, wood popping, the wind shifting, he registered with a flick of an ear. Then Ryan whispered, almost to himself, "My glove." Jack looked up from the workbench. "What glove?" Ryan blinked, as if the memory had crawled out of the fog on its own. "When they took me down, I had the files, the evidence. They were going to kill me if they found it, so I stuffed the memory card inside the lining of my left glove." He rubbed his temple. "I dropped it when they dragged me to the truck." Rex's head snapped up. His eyes found Ryan's instantly. The dog stood, stiffened, then padded over to the corner where Ryan's shredded uniform lay folded on the floor. He nosed the glove once, then again. Jack watched, his voice low. "He knows what you're talking about." Rex turned toward the door, tail raised, body tense with focus. Then he barked once, short, precise, commanding. Lucy set down the lantern. "You can't be serious. You're both half frozen. It's pitch black out there." Jack reached for his coat anyway. "He's serious enough." Ryan was already on his feet. "If those files are still there, we need them before someone else does." Outside, the snow had hardened to a crust that snapped beneath their boots. The moon was half-eaten by clouds, throwing pale light through the branches. Rex led, nose to the wind, moving with the same single-minded drive that soldiers used to move through gunfire. They retraced the path down to the creek, then veered off into thicker trees. Rex slowed, sniffed the air, then began digging into a mound of ice near a broken fence post. His paws hit something solid. He whined once and looked back at them. Jack knelt, brushing snow away until his glove struck plastic. A small black pouch, sealed tight and frozen to the ground. He pried it loose and handed it to Ryan, who tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a clear zip bag, clouded with frost. Lucy shone the flashlight over it. USB drive and a SIM card. Ryan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "That's it. That's the case file. The transfers, the names, everything." Jack studied the bag. The frost crept along its edges like veins. "We can't take it back to the cabin. If they tracked you once, they'll track you again. We need a clean spot." They moved to the ranger shed Lucy used during patrol season, a mile east. The lock had rusted, but Jack popped it open with a hammer claw. Inside, the space smelled of pine tar and old diesel. Lucy cleared the work table, while Ryan slid the drive into her field laptop. Lines of code and encrypted files flickered across the screen. Gibberish at first. Lucy's fingers flew over the keys. "Give me a second. The header says Hawktech Defense Systems. This is internal." Jack's jaw tightened. "That name again?" Ryan leaned closer. "Can you open it?" Lucy frowned. "It's layered encryption, military grade. Whoever built this didn't want it cracked. But look here." She pointed at a string of numbers. Transaction logs, routing through offshore accounts, each one tied to the same authorization code. Jack squinted. "That prefix looks familiar." "It should," Lucy said. "It's a Department of Defense contractor code." Ryan went still. "Whose?" Lucy pulled the metadata. When the name appeared, the air left the room. "Lieutenant Grant Weller," she said. "Your old commanding officer." Ryan's hands curled into fists. "He set us up. He used the department's resources to move this stuff under our watch." Jack's eyes stayed on the screen. The data scrolled on its own, a cascade of dates, coordinates, and shipments marked with vague descriptions: hydraulic components, compressed gas units, stabilizers. But the last entry stopped them cold. Shipment 24B, destination, Silver Ridge, WI. Lucy swallowed. "They're moving hardware through your mountain." Jack stepped back, breathing through the weight of it. "They're not moving. They're testing. That's why the gunfire yesterday. They're field testing weapons up here under the radar." Rex shifted suddenly, his tail low. His ears pricked toward the open crack of the door. Jack froze. Outside, something clicked in the snow. Not branches, not the wind. The faint, deliberate rhythm of boots moving in a semicircle. Lucy killed the light. The laptop's glow painted their faces pale. Ryan whispered, "How did they find us?" Jack's eyes found the bag on the table. The SIM card. He pulled it out, flipped it over, and saw the tiny red diode blinking once, twice. They've been tracking it. He shoved it into the stove barrel in the corner and slammed the door shut. The red light disappeared into the flames. A second later, headlights flared outside the shed. 2, maybe 3 vehicles, engines growling low. Jack grabbed the rifle from the wall. "Out the back!" Lucy swung open the hatch near the supply crates. The cold hit like a slap. Rex was already halfway through, his body pressed low against the snow. Ryan followed, laptop under his arm. Jack went last, glancing, once over his shoulder. Through the window, he saw silhouettes, armed, coordinated, sweeping flashlights in arcs. They weren't police. They were the Hawks. They slid through the trees until the lights faded behind them. The snow swallowed their tracks. When they stopped to catch breath, Ryan knelt beside Rex and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You saved us again, boy." Rex's breath fogged the air, but his eyes were calm, sharp. He wasn't just reacting, he was choosing, watching every angle. A soldier who had learned the meaning of silence. Jack looked back toward the ridge, where the headlights still ghosted through the dark. "We've got the proof," he said quietly. "Now we just need to live long enough to use it." Rex turned his head toward him, ears pricked, as if he understood every word. And for the first time that night, Jack believed he did. The storm had rolled back in by the time they reached the cabin again. Snow drove hard against the windows, muffling the world into silence. Jack's hands worked steady over the comm unit on the table, an old military uplink patched into a shortwave transmitter. Ryan hovered nearby, glancing from the flickering signal light to the door every few seconds. Static filled the room, then a thin, steady tone. Jack leaned toward the microphone. "Doyle, this is Harlow. You copy?" A pause. Then a familiar voice broke through, rough with age but clear. "Jack? Jesus, I thought you were a ghost." "Not yet," Jack said. "Listen carefully. We've got a live trail, illicit shipments, arms laundering, black contracts under HawkTech. I'm sending the encrypted data now." Ryan slid the flash drive into the port. The old monitor blinked to life, code spilling across the screen. Outside, the wind clawed harder. Rex paced near the door, nose twitching. Tom Doyle's voice crackled through again. "I've heard whispers about Weller, but nothing that sticks. You sure about this?" "Sure enough that we're being hunted," Jack said. "We need federal jurisdiction before they wipe us clean." The transmission bar climbed, 30%, then 50. Rex froze, his ears sharpened. A low growl built deep in his chest. Ryan frowned. "What is it?" Rex stepped toward the window, nose pressed to the gap in the curtain. His muscles locked. The growl deepened. Jack didn't need words. He killed the lights. The cabin plunged into darkness. Ryan whispered, "You see something?" Jack's answer came tight. "Movement, 3 o'clock, maybe 4. The snow outside glowed faintly under a veil of red light, laser dots sweeping methodically across the wall. The crack of ice under boots followed, slow, measured. Jack grabbed the rifle, checked the bolt. "They found us." Rex barked once, loud and sharp. That bark saved them. The next second, a burst of rounds tore through the front window, shredding the table and scattering sparks. Jack shoved Ryan behind the stove. The radio exploded in a shower of static. "Back exit!" Jack hissed. "Now." But Rex didn't move. He bolted toward the door, shoulders tense, barking in a staccato rhythm that almost sounded like code. Ryan caught sight of a shadow moving outside, a glint of metal in the snow. "Tripwire!" Jack shouted. Rex lunged, his body hitting the door with full weight. The explosion came a half-second later, an improvised charge buried beneath the porch. The blast ripped through the entryway, showering debris across the room. Rex's body flew sideways, striking the wall with a thud. Jack crawled to him through the smoke. The dog's flank was bleeding, fur matted dark. But Rex's eyes were open, locked on the doorway. He tried to stand. Ryan fired through the broken window, short bursts, aiming at the muzzle flashes outside. 2 shadows dropped. The rest retreated to cover. Jack dragged Rex behind the couch and pressed a hand to the wound. The bullet had grazed the shoulder, tearing muscle but missing bone. "You're all right, soldier," Jack murmured. Rex's chest heaved, breath ragged, yet his gaze stayed fixed on the open door. He growled low, warning Jack just as a figure appeared in the snow. Tactical gear, rifle raised. Jack fired once. The man folded into the drift. Then silence. Just the fire's dull crack and the hiss of the wind slipping through the holes in the wall. Ryan leaned against the stove, reloading with shaking hands. "How many?" "Enough," Jack said. He tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped Rex's wound. "They won't quit. They think the data died with the comms." Rex gave a faint whine, shifting to press his head against Jack's arm. The gesture was small, but it landed hard. Jack had seen men thank him the same way on battlefields that never made it to the news. Ryan crouched beside them. "He saved us. If he hadn't jumped." "He knew," Jack said quietly. "He saw it before we did." Outside, a distant engine started. The Hawks were pulling back for now, regrouping. Jack looked at the half-frozen woods beyond the window and knew this was only the first round. He lifted Rex carefully, setting him on the blanket by the hearth. The dog's eyes fluttered but didn't close. He stayed alert, guarding even in pain. Ryan exhaled, staring at the shattered doorway. "They'll come again." Jack nodded. "And next time, we'll be ready." Rex stirred, tail giving one slow thump against the floor, as if to agree. In that moment, Jack realized something the war had taught him long ago. Loyalty doesn't come from orders, it comes from choice. And this dog had already made his. The wind over Red Creek was knife-sharp, cutting through the seams of Jack's coat as he climbed the last slope toward the old transmission tower. The sky was heavy with storm light, the kind that turned snow into steel. They had been moving for hours, following the frozen ridge under the cover of night. Behind them, the whole cabin was nothing but ashes and smoke swallowed by the forest. Tom Doyle had met them halfway up the pass, his black SUV camouflaged under branches. He looked older than Jack remembered, lined face, eyes that had seen too many operations gone wrong. But his handshake was solid. "You weren't kidding," he said, glancing at Rex limping beside Ryan. "You brought a war to my backyard." "Not by choice," Jack answered. "We just need 5 minutes of clean bandwidth." Inside the abandoned relay station, the smell of rust and ozone hung in the air. Ryan and Lucy set up the portable uplink on an old table beneath the flickering red light. Tom patched into his encrypted channel, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "If the signal holds, DC will have everything in 4 minutes." Jack stood at the broken doorway, rifle in hand, scanning the tree line. Snow fell in heavy sheets. The quiet was too perfect. Rex lay near the entrance, bandaged shoulder rising and falling. Every few seconds, his nose lifted, testing the air. Then suddenly, his head snapped toward the left. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. Jack didn't question it. He shouted, "Kill the light!" The room went dark. A second later, a searchlight flared across the windows. The hum of engines echoed from below the hill. Voices barked orders through the storm. Ryan crouched beside Rex. "They found us." Tom cursed under his breath. "Signal's at 80%. We can't stop now." The first bullets shattered the glass, cutting through the cold air in flashes of light. Jack returned fire, the muzzle flare illuminating his face for split seconds at a time. Snow burst off the ground like smoke. "3 vehicles!" Lucy shouted. "Coming from the South Road!" Then came the voice, calm, smooth, carrying through the storm like a taunt from another lifetime. "Jack Harlow." Jack froze. He knew that tone. Grant Weller stepped from behind a truck, wrapped in tactical armor, his rifle loose in his hands like a man who'd already decided the ending. "You're outnumbered, old man. Lower your weapon. Let's make this easy." Ryan rose behind the broken table, gun steady. "You set me up, Weller. You killed 2 of my men for profit. Nothing's easy after that." Weller smiled. "Ryan, you were never supposed to get that far. You're a good cop. But you don't understand the cost of keeping the world turning. You give that data to the Bureau, and everyone dies screaming. You, me, your dog." He gestured toward Rex. "I can make this disappear quietly. You can walk away." Ryan's voice was flat, cold. "No one's walking away anymore." The wind roared through the broken door. The radio beeped, 95%. Then the night exploded. Gunfire tore through the windows. Tom ducked behind the console, shouting coordinates into the radio. Lucy dragged the laptop off the table just as a bullet shattered the screen. Sparks flared across the floor. Rex bolted forward before anyone could stop him. He leapt through the doorway, hitting the snow in a blur of muscle and fury. Weller had turned his rifle toward Ryan, finger tightening on the trigger, when Rex hit him full in the chest. The impact drove Weller backward into the snow. His rifle spun away. Rex's jaws locked around his arm, tearing through fabric and metal alike. Weller screamed, thrashing, trying to reach the sidearm on his belt. Ryan was already moving. He grabbed Weller's wrist, twisting until bone popped. The gun fell. A second shot cracked through the night, Jack's rifle. The mercenary flanking Weller dropped instantly. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The wind, the snow, even the sound of breath. Only the blinking light on the transmitter kept time. Tom's voice broke the silence. "Transmission complete. Washington's got it." Ryan released Weller, who collapsed into the snow, blood soaking his sleeve. Jack stepped closer, rifle aimed. "You're done, Lieutenant." Weller's lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. "You think justice still works up here?" Jack nodded once. "No, but it works down there." He jerked his head toward the sky, where distant rotors began to thrum, the faint whir of approaching helicopters. Rex limped back toward the doorway, his breath coming hard, muzzle streaked with blood and snow. Ryan dropped to his knees beside him. "Easy, buddy. It's over." The dog's chest heaved, but his eyes stayed locked on the horizon, as if waiting for one last threat. Jack crouched beside them, resting a hand on Rex's neck. He didn't hesitate. Jack said softly. Didn't even think about himself. Ryan looked up, voice breaking. "That's what makes him better than any of us." The helicopters grew louder, their searchlights cutting through the storm. Tom waved a flare to mark their position. Jack turned toward Weller, now cuffed and silent in the snow. "You offered us a way out," he said. "But the truth doesn't hide forever." Weller glared up at him, but his voice was gone, lost under the thunder of the arriving FBI units. As the agents swarmed the ridge, Jack stood back, watching them take Weller away. He didn't feel victory, just the ache of something finished, something burned clean. Ryan looked at Rex again, brushing snow from his fur. "You saved me twice," he whispered. Rex's tail thumped weakly against the snow. One beat, then another. Jack looked toward the dark horizon where the storm had begun to break. "He's not saving you," he said quietly. "He's guarding the truth." The first light of dawn crawled across Red Creek, revealing the aftermath of a night that had rewritten everything. Smoke rose from the spent gunfire, snow packed with boot prints, brass casings gleaming like scattered truth. The sound of rotors faded as the last FBI helicopter lifted off, carrying Grant Weller in cuffs and silence. Jack stood by the edge of the ridge, the wind tugging at his torn jacket. Below, agents swarmed the site, collecting weapons, tagging evidence, photographing every inch of the snow. It wasn't the battlefield he'd left behind years ago, but it looked the same. Men moving through wreckage, trying to make sense of what war had done. Tom Doyle approached, hat pulled low, the collar of his coat stiff with frost. "We got the whole data cache," he said. "Every transaction, every name. DC is already tearing through Weller's chain of command. You just cracked open a 10-year black project." Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes followed Ryan, who stood near the ambulance talking with two agents from Internal Affairs. They were shaking his hand. Firm, respectful. The kind reserved for someone who'd survived something no one else could have. For the first time since the ambush, Ryan's shoulders looked lighter. Tom nudged Jack's arm. "You did good, Harlow. You didn't have to get involved." Jack's jaw tightened. Didn't feel like a choice. Tom smirked. "It never does it?" He tipped his chin toward the ambulance. "Your dog's a damn legend. We've got a chopper waiting to take him to the field clinic in Fairpoint. Military vets are already calling. They want to cover the surgery." Jack turned just as Lucy climbed out of the back of the van, her gloves streaked with blood and antiseptic. "He's stable," she said. "They'll have to take the bullet out, but it missed the bone. He's one hell of a fighter." Jack exhaled, the tension breaking like a thaw. He always was. Rex lay inside the vehicle, wrapped in thermal blankets, chest rising slow but steady. When he saw Jack, his tail moved, just once, weak but deliberate. Jack leaned in close, his voice low. "You rest now, soldier. You've done enough." Rex blinked, eyes heavy with exhaustion but still alert, still watching. It wasn't the look of surrender. It was vigilance, as if even sedated he refused to stop guarding them. Hours later the storm cleared completely. Ryan stood by Jack's truck, paperwork in hand. "They're reinstating me," he said with a faint laugh. "Cleared of all charges. They even called me a hero on live TV." He looked at Jack. "You know they'll want to do the same for you." Jack shook his head. "I've had enough cameras for one lifetime." Ryan's expression softened. "Then let me say it for the record. I wouldn't be breathing if not for you and that dog." Jack offered a quiet nod, eyes on the snow that stretched endlessly towards the horizon. He did what we all used to do. He ran toward the sound of trouble. 2 weeks passed before Rex was strong enough to walk again. The day the stitches came out, Lucy brought him to the ridge behind the cabin. The sun hit his coat in golden streaks, and for a moment it was as if the war had never touched them. Lucy turned to Jack. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's no proper rescue station for animals around here. Between the storms, the hunters, the wild strays, this mountain could use one." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You want to build a shelter?" She smiled faintly. "Not a shelter. A sanctuary. Somewhere they can heal." Jack glanced at Rex, who was sniffing the air near the tree line, testing his strength, tail high. "Guess we already have our first guardian." The weeks that followed brought quiet back to the mountain. The station they rebuilt became a lifeline for lost hikers and wounded animals alike. Lucy handled the logistics, Jack handled the hands-on work, and Rex, ski still visible beneath his fur, patrolled the grounds like it was sacred duty. Ryan visited once before leaving for DC. He stood on the porch with a look that hovered between gratitude and guilt. "You ever wonder," he asked, "how many more of these ghosts are out there? How many secrets like Weller's?" Jack's gaze drifted to the peaks beyond Red Creek, where the snow never melted. "Every war leaves something buried," he said. "Some just happened to surface sooner." That night, after Ryan's truck disappeared down the valley, Jack sat by the fire with Rex at his feet. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and soundless. He looked into the flames and whispered more to himself than anyone else. Justice doesn't stay buried forever, but the truth always waits under the snow. Rex shifted, resting his head on Jack's boot, eyes half closed but still listening. Even in rest, the soldier never stopped standing guard. By the time the snow finally melted off Red Creek, the mountain no longer felt like a battlefield. The wind had softened, the rivers ran clear again, and life began to crawl out from beneath the frost. Where the old relay station once stood scarred and abandoned, a new sign hung against fresh timber: Haven Ridge Rescue Center. Jack hammered the last nail into the post, wiping sweat and sawdust from his brow. Behind him, Lucy stacked feed bags beside a row of kennels they had built by hand. Each was lined with thick straw and the smell of pine. Rex padded between them, inspecting every corner like a commander reviewing his troops. His shoulder had healed, but the faint scar beneath the fur glimmered in the sunlight, a reminder of what he'd survived. Ryan stepped out of a pickup, his police jacket folded over his arm. "You weren't kidding," he said, taking in the view. "It's something." Jack grinned faintly. "It's home, for whoever needs one." Inside the cabin-turned-clinic, Lucy checked on 2 new rescues, a young shepherd mix with frost-bitten paws and a trembling retriever found near an avalanche site. She moved with the patience of someone who knew pain by name. "They're responding well," she said. "It's like they understand this place is meant for healing." Jack nodded. "That's the point. Not just for them." Outside, a group of veterans had gathered near the fence line, unloading gear. Men and women from different wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, and the ones no one ever talked about, each carrying quiet weight in their eyes. They had answered Jack's message: "Come train with us, not to fight, but to rebuild." Rex walked straight toward them, tail up, body steady but calm. One veteran reached out, hesitating. Rex pressed his head into the man's hand. The soldier let out a shaky laugh, the kind that comes after years of silence. "Guess he approves," he said. Jack watched the moment unfold. He always knows who needs it most. In the weeks that followed, the ridge transformed. The kennels filled with rescued dogs, some retired canines, others strays that had wandered too close to death. The veterans trained them to search, to comfort, to alert. And in teaching the dogs to trust again, they began to trust themselves. Ryan spent weekends there, between assignments. He helped rebuild the trail bridge, ran drills with the new recruits, and took quiet walks with Rex at dawn. The old instincts of the badge were still there, but something had shifted. He no longer carried his weapon everywhere. Justice, he'd realized, wasn't a uniform. It was a choice you made when no one was watching. One morning, Lucy found Jack sitting on the porch, carving a piece of wood with his pocket knife. He was shaping something, carefully, deliberately. When she stepped closer, she saw it was a small figure of Rex, head lifted, eyes alert. "You could have carved anything," she said softly. "Why him?" Jack smiled without looking up. "Because he never asked for anything. Not medals, not praise, just the chance to protect." Lucy nodded. "He's the reason we're all still standing." Jack finished the carving, brushed off the wood dust, and placed it on the railing. The sun caught it just right, casting a shadow that stretched across the porch floor, long, proud, and unbroken. Later that evening, they held a small ceremony. The veterans stood in a circle as Jack spoke a few words. "We built this place out of what was broken. Every scar, every loss. It all meant something because it brought us here." Ryan added quietly, "And because one dog refused to stop fighting." Rex lay beside him, head resting on his paws, listening. When the last light of sunset touched the ridge, he lifted his head and gave a single bark. Low, steady, certain. The sound rolled through the valley like an oath. Jack looked out over Haven Ridge, where the fields had begun to bloom with spring grass, and felt something inside him settle. The ghosts were still there, but they no longer haunted him. They guarded him, like Rex guarded the ridge. Faithful, silent, eternal. For the first time in years, Jack allowed himself to breathe without looking over his shoulder. The mountain no longer echoed with gunfire. It echoed with life. A full year had passed since the gunfire on Red Creek. The snow had come and gone twice, but the ridge was alive now, greener, louder, and full of motion. Where there had once been silence and fear, there was now laughter echoing across the hills. The sign above the gate read, "Haven Ridge Rescue Center," its letters carved by hand into the cedar archway. Beyond the gate stood a new addition, a bronze statue of a German shepherd, head lifted high, eyes fixed toward the distant snow-capped peaks. The sculptor had captured every detail, the poised ears, the scar on the shoulder, even the faint ripple in the fur that ran along his back. Beneath it, a small plaque bore only one line. "He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth." Jack Harlow stood by the statue, leaning on his cane, his breath curling in the crisp morning air. His beard had gone almost white, but his eyes still carried that steady glint of defiance that had survived too many winters. The center behind him bustled with new volunteers, veterans training rescue dogs, children learning basic care, hikers stopping by to donate blankets. A group of schoolchildren was touring the grounds that day. They clustered near the statue, wide-eyed and whispering, as if afraid to break the spell. One boy, no older than 10, looked up at Jack and tugged his jacket sleeve. "Sir," he asked softly, "is that the dog from the story?" Jack paused, then smiled. His hand brushed across the smooth bronze muzzle as though it was still warm. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's him." "What was his name?" the boy asked. "Rex," Jack said. "And he was the kind of friend who made you believe in things again. Honor, loyalty, truth." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "Did he really save people?" Jack nodded, his voice low but firm. "He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. That's how he saved us all." The boy smiled, and something in Jack's chest loosened. Ryan Keller arrived a few minutes later, wearing his new uniform, no longer standard police blue, but the dark green of a federal rescue coordinator. He shook Jack's hand, then knelt beside a young shepherd in training, scratching its ears. "They're starting to send us cases from 3 counties out," he said. "The word's spreading. Haven Ridge works." Jack looked around at the kennels, the open fields, the laughter mixing with the sound of barking. "It works because people still care enough to show up." Lucy stepped out of the main cabin, clipboard in hand, hair tied back under a faded baseball cap. "We got 2 more rescues coming in from the South Pass," she called. "One's a stray, the other's retired K9. You'll want to meet them." Jack's smile grew. Always room for one more. As the sun climbed higher, the visitors moved on, and the ridge fell into its usual rhythm, axes splitting wood, dogs chasing through tall grass, the distant hum of an approaching chopper bringing supplies. Ryan walked with Jack along the fence line. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't heard that bark?" Ryan asked. Jack stared out at the valley, where snow still lingered in the shaded gullies. "Every day," he said, "and every day I hear it again. Reminds me that truth's a living thing. You don't bury it, it waits. Sometimes it takes a dog to dig it up." They stopped at the overlook where the ridge dropped away into the river valley. From here, the entire center was visible. The cabins, the training grounds, the stretch of forest that had once been a war zone and was now a sanctuary. Ryan put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You built something here, old man. Out of all that chaos, you gave it meaning." Jack chuckled. "Rex did. I just listened." A sudden bark echoed from the field, a sharp, commanding sound. One of the trainees, a sable-coated shepherd, was alerting its handler to a staged search. The handler laughed, praising him, while the dog wagged its tail proudly. For a moment, the sound felt like an echo from another time. Jack closed his eyes and could almost see Rex bounding through the snow again, fearless and bright-eyed, charging towards danger because someone needed saving. He could still feel the heat of that loyalty, the kind that outlives death itself. "Still guarding, huh?" he murmured to the wind. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. Somewhere in that quiet, it felt like an answer. As the camera drifted upward, the image widened. Haven Ridge glowing under the afternoon light, fields rippling in gold and green, the statue of Rex standing sentinel at the gate. The mountains beyond shimmered under the lingering snow, eternal and watchful. Jack's voice lingered, soft but steady. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. The screen faded to black. Then in simple white letters, "What's your story with a loyal pet?" A pause. Then the faint sound of a shepherd's bark echoed once more, distant, alive, eternal. Subscribe to German Shepherd Stories for more tales of loyalty, courage, and second chances.